They told you to fear death, the stillness, the absence, the unknown. But no one warned you about the quieter death, the one that arrives long before your heartbeat stops. The death that happens not in a single moment, but slowly, imperceptibly. The kind you live through, every time you silence your curiosity, every time you numb your hunger for something more, every time you trade authenticity for approval. That is the death you were never taught to see. And by the time you notice it, most of you is already gone. We walk through our days like shadows, mirroring the world, fulfilling roles, repeating rituals, smiling on command, reacting instead of choosing, responding to notifications like trained animals waiting for pellets of dopamine. But underneath the performance, there's a haunting, a tension you can't quite name. You feel it in the quiet moments, in the spaces between conversations, in the glow of the screen, when your reflection flickers back at you. It's the question that creeps in when the distractions fade. Is this it? Is this all there is? Philosophers like Seneca once warned us, it's not that life is short, it's that we waste much of it. We don't die because time runs out. We die because we never truly begin. Sartre said that hell is other people, but perhaps hell is becoming what other people expect. Layer by layer, choice by choice, you slip into a version of yourself that feels safe, but isn't real. Heidegger called it inauthentic being. A condition where you live according to norms and expectations, not because you chose them, but because you never stop to question them, and so you drift, not towards life, but away from it. You exist, but you're not alive. You move, but you're not free. You laugh, but you're not joyful. What are we so afraid of losing? The job that makes us miserable? The relationships built on performance? The identity we constructed like armor, just to make it through the day without feeling naked? If you're not pursuing the truth, if you're not risking anything for meaning, if you're not even tasting reality, what exactly are you preserving by staying alive? The truth is this: most people are already ghosts, not in some supernatural sense, but in a spiritual one. A soul that once burned, now flickering. A voice that once screamed, now whispering. A life that once dreamed, now surviving. And yet we call this normal. We celebrate it, we package it, we sell it. But deep down, you know something is wrong. You can feel it gnawing at the edges of your consciousness. You weren't meant to live like this. You weren't born just to perform, to comply, to collect comforts in exchange for your essence. You were meant to create, to confront, to awaken, but awakening is painful. And that's why so few do it, because once you see the bars of the cage, you can't pretend they're not there. And once you realize the ghost in your life is you, there's no going back. You are haunted, but not by spirits, by the life you refuse to claim. This emptiness we feel, it wasn't an accident. It was built, constructed brick by brick, ad by ad, distraction by distraction. After the Second World War, the world needed healing. But instead of the soul, it got sedated. Instead of meaning, it got marketing. Enter Edward Bernays, the nephew of Sigmund Freud. He understood something most did not. If you can manipulate desire, you can control the masses. Not by force, not with violence, but with a suggestion. In his book, Propaganda, Bernays proudly described how invisible governors shape public opinion. He didn't see this as sinister. He saw it as necessary for order. But what he created was not order. It was an illusion. Consumerism became the new religion. You weren't valuable for who you were, but for what you bought. Identity became a product, self-worth, a reflection of status. And so, slowly, purpose was replaced with preference. Freedom was recast as the ability to choose between nearly identical brands of cereal. Democracy became a spectacle, a show, carefully curated to feel like participation while ensuring passivity. Erich Fromm saw it coming. In The Sane Society, he warned of a world where people feel profoundly anxious, yet have no words for their suffering, alienated not by poverty or oppression, but by spiritual emptiness, a kind of quiet, humming despair that grows louder in the silence. He called it automaton conformity, where people no longer even notice they've lost themselves, because everyone around them has too. We laugh at the same shows, buy the same products, hold the same polite, hollow conversations, and call that a life. Neil Postman took it a step further. In amusing ourselves to death, he argued that the real danger wasn't censorship, but distraction. Not a boot stamping on a human face forever, but a screen that keeps you entertained, compliant, and docile. This was the new model of control, not through fear, but through comfort. We were taught to fear discomfort, boredom, and silence, because those are the breeding grounds of thought, and thought is dangerous. It leads to questioning, and questioning leads to awakening. But awakening is bad for business. So instead, we were handed entertainment, distraction, content, a flood of images, sounds, trends, just enough to fill the void, never enough to nourish it. It's no wonder we feel empty, not because we've decayed, but because something has been systematically scooped out of us. The ghost returns here, not as a metaphor for death, but for disconnection, from nature, from each other, from ourselves. You were never meant to be a passive observer of life. You were meant to live it. But in a world engineered for consumption, real life becomes threatening. Stillness becomes uncomfortable. Authenticity becomes subversive. And so, we perform. We scroll. We buy. We laugh on cue and cry on command. But the soul watches silently, unimpressed. It knows the difference between joy and dopamine, between peace and sedation. We are not hollow by nature. We have been hollowed, and if we do not recognize the architects of our emptiness, we will keep mistaking the cage for a home. We will decorate it, upgrade it, call it freedom, but it will still be a cage. This was not just a social transformation, it was a psychological one. And now, we carry the consequences not just in our habits, but in our minds, our emotions, our very sense of self. The next question is not just how they emptied us, but what happens to a person once they are emptied. How does the internal machinery of a human being respond to the quiet terror of meaninglessness? Because where purpose is absent, pathology thrives, and that is where we go next. Not all prisons have walls. Some are built inside you, invisible, silent, but absolute. From the moment you're born, the shaping begins, not of your potential, but of your acceptability. What parts of you are welcomed? What parts must be buried? You learn quickly what gets love and what brings rejection. Carl Rogers called this the incongruence between the real self and the ideal self. The real self is who you are, curious, chaotic, feeling, free. The ideal self is who the world says you must become, polished, predictable, controlled, and the more you abandon the former in pursuit of the latter, the more you shrink. Until eventually, there's barely anything left of you at all. What remains is performance, a face you wear like armor, not to protect yourself, but to be accepted. This is the coffin. A life so restrained, so managed, so disembodied, that you forget you were ever whole to begin with. Carl Jung called it the shadow, the parts of you you exile to survive, your anger, your desire, your fear, your need to scream in a world that tells you to whisper. We learn to smile when we want to cry, to stay silent when our soul is howling, to tolerate mediocrity in the name of normalcy. And we wonder why we're anxious, why we're depressed. Why do we feel like something is always missing? Because something is missing. You. Not the one scrolling, performing, nodding politely, but the one who once wanted to dance, to build, to scream, to ask uncomfortable questions, to love without calculation. That version of you didn't die naturally. It was strangled, bit by bit, under layers of social expectation. Trauma, shame, the fear of being alone, the fear of being too much, the fear of not being enough, and so we self-abandon. We silence what makes us different, and become replicas of replicas. It's a suffocating irony. We fear death, yet choose to die internally to avoid rejection. Our culture rewards masks. Conformity is sold as maturity. Authenticity is dismissed as rebellion. Sensitivity is mocked as weakness. And yet we medicate the consequences. Apathy, disassociation. A chronic, low-grade despair we can't name but feel every time we pause long enough to notice. This isn't dysfunction. It's design. A culture that demands compliance must pathologize individuality. And so we're told our pain is a chemical imbalance, our confusion a disorder, our grief a defect. But what if it's not you that's broken, but the world you've been told to fit into? What if your depression is a cry for something real? What if your anxiety is the soul pulling at its chains? We weren't meant to live this way, trained to obey, punished for feeling, rewarded for pretending. The coffin is not just a metaphor. It's a psychological tomb built through repetition of suppression, avoidance, and self-denial. And every day you stay inside it, your true self fades, becomes harder to hear, harder to trust, until one day you forget it was ever there. But deep inside, it waits, buried beneath performance. Beneath the scripts you recite but never wrote, we are not ghosts because we died. We are ghosts because we stopped living. Now we understand the trap. The cage is inside us, and the door is invisible, but not locked. So the next question is the hardest one of all. If you know you're imprisoned, why don't you rebel? Most people don't stay in prisons because they have to. They stay because they've made them comfortable. The walls are soft, the lights are dim, and the silence is filled with endless noise. Plato warned us in his allegory of the cave that people chained in darkness, watching shadows on a wall, would come to mistake illusion for reality, and worse, if you tried to free them, to show them the light outside the cave. They'd kill you for it. Truth is not rejected because it's false. It's rejected because it's painful. Dostoevsky echoed this in The Grand Inquisitor. When Christ returns to earth, he is arrested, not by sinners, but by the church. The Inquisitor tells him, people don't want freedom. They want bread. They want miracles. They want peace of mind, not the agony of choice. And so we inherit this legacy, the slow surrender of truth in exchange for comfort. Not forced upon us, but welcomed. We don't just tolerate sedation, we crave it. Comfort is no longer a luxury, it's a religion. Soft beds, streaming services, endless dopamine loops in our pockets, calories without nutrition, information without meaning, stimulation without connection. It feels like freedom, but it's a crypt. One we line with memory foam and Wi-Fi. A crypt that doesn't smell of death, but lavender, cinnamon, and HD resolution. We are no longer haunted by demons. We're haunted by convenience. Every urge is indulged. Every discomfort is numbed. Every second of stillness is filled with something, anything, so we don't have to feel. We scroll until our minds blur. We eat until our emotions drown. We binge-watch our trauma into the background, and we call it leisure. But the real irony? We built this. We wired the cage. We programmed the addiction. We normalized the rot. Late-stage capitalism didn't sell us chains. It sold us choices. Too many to matter. Too many to question. 15 types of toothpaste, but no time to reflect on your mortality. This is the brilliance of the modern crypt. It doesn't look like death. It looks like luxury, and we sink into it willingly, because the truth is brutal. It asks things of you. It rips away the illusion. It confronts your shame, your fear, your responsibility. Freedom is terrifying, because it means facing the abyss without guarantees. It means owning the parts of you you've spent years suppressing. It means choosing meaning over numbness, again and again. So we stay in the crypt, not because we're forced to, but because it's warm, because it's quiet, because no one expects you to change there. The ghost doesn't escape its coffin. Not because it's trapped, but because it's entertaining. We sleepwalk through our lives with full bellies and empty souls, not dying of starvation, but of saturation. We fear pain more than we crave truth. We fear feeling more than we fear fading. And so we become spectators to our own existence, haunted, not by death, but in life we keep putting off. Yet somewhere, outside this padded crypt, life still roars. Not safe, not easy, but real. The world beyond the coffin isn't hollow. It's wild. It's terrifying. And it's alive, are you? At first, there's no light, only the sound of something cracking. Not outside you, inside. A hairline fracture running through everything you thought you were. The awakening doesn't come like a sunrise. It feels like an earthquake. Subtle at first, then violent, disorienting, inescapable. The ghost begins to stir, but waking up is not enlightenment. It's terrifying. Nietzsche called it the abyss, that dreadful place where meaning vanishes, and your eyes adjust to a darkness so profound it stares back into you. He warned, if you gaze long enough into the abyss will gaze into you. Most people misread that. They think the abyss is evil, corrupting. But the truth is more disturbing. The abyss reflects what's always been inside you. The lies you swallowed, the roles you played, the parts of yourself you amputated just to be loved, accepted, tolerated, and suddenly, none of it holds. Your job title, your politics, your curated personality, they begin to feel like costumes at a masquerade you can't unsee. This is Kierkegaard's dread. The sickening vertigo of infinite possibility. Not the fear of what is, but the terrifying freedom of what could be. You realize you're not just the product of your past. You're responsible for your future. It's enough to make people run. Back into the crypt, back into the simulation, back into routine, noise, sedation. Anything to silence that awful clarity, because once the false self begins to disintegrate, what's left? Just you, raw, untethered, unedited. This is why most people don't wake up, because the ego doesn't surrender quietly. It screams, it's a bargain. It clings to anything that will restore the illusion of certainty. But awakening isn't about becoming someone new. It's about mourning who you never truly were. Grieving the layers you mistook for identity, letting go of the mirrors you used to recognize yourself. And in the wreckage, something ancient flickers. Not joy, not peace, but the truth, the kind of truth that burns, that rearranges your cells, that doesn't answer questions, but erases the ones that never mattered. You begin to see the world as it is, messy, contradictory, unscripted, alive. You begin to feel again, not just pleasure but pain, not just comfort but courage, not just existence but presence. To stop being a ghost, you must first be willing to haunt yourself, to walk through the ruins of your own persona, to hear the echoes of the lies you lived by, and to stand in that silence without flinching. This is not a self-help journey. It's death, and also a birth. The shell cracks, the shadow surfaces, and the storm doesn't pass over you, it passes through you. But in that storm there's power, not the power to control, but the power to be. The crypt is far behind now. There's no going back. And yet for the first time, you're not lost. You're finally home. What happens after the storm? What comes after the ego shatters? After the illusions collapse? After the silence makes its home inside you? The answer isn't triumph. Not in the way we're taught to imagine it. There's no fanfare, no parade, no instant enlightenment or permanent peace. Instead, there is stillness. A quiet, unfamiliar stillness. Not the numb kind you knew in your crypt, but the raw, alert stillness of presence. You wake up one morning, and the world looks the same. The streets, the sky, the faces around you. But something has changed, subtly, irrevocably. You see through things, not with judgment, but with clarity. You've passed through death, not the physical kind, but the death of the false self. And what's left is someone you've never truly met before. You, Viktor Frankl, once said that life is never made unbearable by circumstances, only by a lack of meaning. And now, meaning doesn't come from outside anymore. Not from praise, wealth, or approval. It comes from how deeply you can live in truth, even when it hurts. Especially when it hurts. This is not the life you were sold. It's not glamorous or convenient. You won't always be understood. You might feel alone often, more alone than ever. But you're alone in the way a mountain stands alone, solid, rooted, real. Carl Jung described the individuation process as becoming who you truly are, not who the world told you to be. It's not self-improvement, it's self-confrontation. And then, self-acceptance. You stop trying to fix yourself because you finally realize you were never broken, just buried. You become what myths call the wounded healer, not immune to suffering but familiar with it. You begin to walk among others who are still asleep, still sedated, still chasing the shadows on the cave wall. And instead of resenting them, you understand them, because you were them. And you carry that empathy like a torch. You don't preach, you don't convert. You live, fully, not recklessly, but consciously. You start to notice things, how the wind feels on your skin, how rare honest words are, how much beauty hides in moments no algorithm can package. You laugh more easily, cry more freely, speak more, slowly. And when you say no, it's not from fear, it's from love. Love for your boundaries, love for your time, love for your life. You are no longer afraid of pain, because you've seen that pain can be a teacher. You are no longer desperate for comfort, because comfort almost killed you. And you are no longer seduced by noise, because now silence speaks louder than anything else. You become what ancient stories called a walker between worlds. Not a guru, not a saint, just a human, awake in a world of sleepwalkers. Alive, in a land of ghosts, and even though you still struggle, because awakening doesn't make you perfect, you no longer betray yourself to belong. You no longer shrink yourself to fit in. You no longer need the approval of the dead to justify being alive, and one day it hits you. You feared death your whole life, but now, finally, you are alive enough to meet it, and when it comes, whenever it comes, you won't beg for more time. You'll meet it with open eyes, with no regrets, because you lived, not perfectly, not painlessly, but truthfully, and that is enough. What if death is not the enemy? What if the terror, the dread, the endless chase to avoid it are the true prisons? Ancient Stoics, long before modern anxiety flooded our minds, whispered a radical idea. Death is natural. It is the final horizon we all must cross. Not to be feared, not to be denied, but to be accepted, fully and without resistance. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the obstacle to our peace is not death itself, but the fear and denial of it. He urged us to practice memento mori, to remember death every day so that we might live. with purpose, with urgency, with honesty. This is not morbid fatalism. It is liberation. When you stop running from death, something remarkable happens. Life sharpens, colors brighten. Every moment gains weight and meaning. To live fully is to accept death as a friend, not a fear. Buddhist teachings echo this truth through detachment, not as cold indifference, but as deep awareness. Attachment to permanence, to control, to self-image is the root of suffering. Embracing impermanence, embracing death, frees the heart from chains. In that quiet acceptance, life becomes a precious gift, not a burden. Pain does not disappear, but it no longer overwhelms. Joy is not constant, but it is profound when it comes. The silence that follows truth is not emptiness. It is presence, a deep, resonant stillness where all contradictions fade, where fear dissolves into calm. The ghost finally lets go of the coffin, not by escaping it, but by realizing it was never a prison to begin with. This is the final reckoning. Not how long we live, but how deeply. Not what we accumulate, but what we surrender. Not the fear of death, but the courage to embrace it. In that embrace, life and death are no longer enemies, but dance partners. Turning, folding, flowing into one another, and in that dance, the true meaning of living is found. A breath, a pause, a quiet truth. You are alive, because you have stopped running, and in that stopping, you have truly begun.